You know how sometimes you just get a craving for something specific? That was me one evening. I'd been working late and didn't feel like cooking when I got home. Subway was just around the corner from my apartment, so I figured, why not? A quick sandwich would be perfect. I could be in and out in under 10 minutes, or at least that was the plan. I walked in, and it was one of those smaller Subway locations, tucked into the corner of a strip mall. It was around 9 p.m., so it wasn't too busy. Just a couple of people sitting at tables eating their subs. The place had this weird vibe though. The fluorescent lights were too bright, almost flickering, and there was this low hum from the refrigerators that seemed louder than usual. It made me feel uneasy, but I shrugged it off. I mean, it's just a sandwich place, right? There was this one guy behind the counter. He seemed normal at first glance, but something was off about him. He had this kind of blank expression, like he was going through the motions. He didn't even look up when I walked in, just kept his eyes fixed on the counter, almost like he was in some kind of trance. I approached the counter, trying to decide what to order. The usual, turkey and cheese. Should be simple enough. I said hi, and he looked up at me finally. His eyes were, I don't know how to describe it, empty, like there was nothing going on behind them. He didn't say anything, just waited for me to start ordering. I remember thinking it was a little rude, but maybe he was just having a bad day. Who knows? I started listing off what I wanted. Turkey on wheat, no cheese, all the veggies. He didn't acknowledge anything I said, just started making the sandwich, his hands moving almost mechanically. As he worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. You know that gut feeling you get when you're in a situation that doesn't feel right? Yeah, that was kicking in hard. I glanced around the store, and that's when I noticed something even weirder. The other customers. They were all sitting there, but they weren't eating. They weren't even talking, just staring at their sandwiches or at nothing in particular. One guy had his sub in his hands but was just holding it, not taking a bite, not doing anything. It was creepy, but I tried to ignore it. Maybe they were all just as tired as I was. Maybe they'd had a long day and were just zoning out. But still, something about it didn't sit right with me. I looked back at the sandwich artist and he was almost done with my sub. He wrapped it up, handed it to me without a word, and went back to staring at the counter. No smile, no "have a nice day," just silence. I paid for my sandwich and turned to leave, but something made me stop. It was like my feet were glued to the floor. I looked over at the tables again, and now all of them, every single person, was looking at me. Not just glancing, but staring. It felt like I was the only real person in the room, like they were all mannequins or something. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck, and my heart started pounding. What the hell was going on? I quickly made my way to a table near the window, figuring I'd eat there so I could keep an eye on things. I sat down and unwrapped my sandwich, but my appetite was gone. I took out my phone, thinking maybe I should call someone, but who would I call? What would I even say? Hey, I'm at Subway, and it's really creepy in here. Yeah, that wouldn't go over well. I took a bite of my sandwich, more out of habit than hunger, and tried to act normal, but I could still feel their eyes on me. The whole time, just watching. I glanced up and they were still staring, not moving, not blinking, just staring. The guy behind the counter was still standing there too, his back to me now, just staring down at his hands. It was like I had walked into some kind of bizarre nightmare. I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I wrapped up the rest of my sandwich and stood up to leave. As I did, I noticed the guy behind the counter was now looking at me through the reflection in the glass case that held the toppings. His eyes were still that same empty, hollow look, but now they were following my every move. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I headed for the door, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard a noise behind me. It was a chair scraping against the floor. I turned around slowly, and one of the customers, a woman who had been sitting in the corner, was standing up now. She was looking right at me, her expression blank, but her eyes were wide, like she was in some kind of trance. Then she started walking toward me, slow and deliberate. Panic shot through me. I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open, stepping out into the cool night air. I thought about running, but I forced myself to walk, to not make it obvious that I was freaking out. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. I didn't look back, not until I was halfway across the parking lot. When I finally turned around, the woman was standing in the doorway, just staring after me. And she wasn't alone. The others had joined her, including the guy behind the counter. They were all just standing there, side by side, watching me leave. No one else was around, no cars driving by, no people walking down the sidewalk, just them. It was like time had stopped for everyone except me. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I started the engine and sped out of there, not caring if I was breaking the speed limit. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, door locked behind me, the lights on. I tried to calm down, to tell myself it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with that place. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Hey, there's a bunch of weird people at Subway? I mean, it's not exactly illegal to be creepy, so I tried to forget about it, to chalk it up to my imagination. Maybe they were just weird people, and I was overreacting. But here's the thing. A few days later, I drove by that Subway again, just to see if it was still bothering me, if it was still as creepy in the daylight, and it was closed. Not just for the day, but boarded up, like it had been shut down for a while. The sign was gone, the windows were covered with plywood, and there was a for lease sign out front. It was like the place had never been open at all. I asked around, checked with some friends, but no one seemed to remember it being there. One guy even said that spot had been empty for months, that the Subway had closed down last year. I know what I saw though. I know I walked in there, ordered a sandwich, sat down, and had the creepiest experience of my life. I don't know what happened that night, if it was some kind of weird prank or something more sinister, but it stuck with me ever since. Every time I see a Subway now, I get this uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I'm being watched. I haven't gone back to one since, and every once in a while, when I'm walking down the street or sitting in my car, I'll get that same feeling, like eyes are on me, like someone somewhere is watching. Maybe it was just a bad dream, a trick of my mind playing on me. Or maybe there's something out there, something that watches and waits in places like that, places you think are safe, where you're just another face in the crowd, until you're not. You know how sometimes you just get this craving and you can't ignore it? That's what happened to me one night. I was feeling super lazy and didn't want to cook, so I thought I'd hit up the Subway down the street. It was already pretty late, probably around 9:30 or 10 p.m., but they stay open until 11, so I figured I'd be fine. I walk in, and it's pretty much empty. Just me and this one guy behind the counter. He looks up when I come in, and there's something about the way he watches me that gives me a little chill, but I brush it off. He's probably just bored, right? Working late, not many customers, I get it. I step up to the counter, and he's got this blank look on his face. Not the usual, hi, welcome to Subway vibe you usually get. I tell him I'll have a footlong on Italian herbs and cheese, turkey, all the standard stuff. He just nods, but there's no expression on his face. It's weird, but I try to act normal. Maybe he's just having a bad night or something. As he starts making my sandwich, I notice how slow he's going. Like, painfully slow. It's almost like he's doing it on purpose. And the whole time, he's not saying a word, not asking what veggies I want or if I want it toasted. Just this silence hanging in the air. I start feeling a bit uncomfortable, but what am I gonna do? Walk out because a guy's making my sandwich too slow? He finally finishes, and I tell him what I want on it. He adds the veggies and all, but he's not looking at the sandwich. He's looking at me. It's this weird, intense stare that's starting to freak me out. I try to avoid eye contact, just glancing around the empty shop, but I can feel his eyes on me the whole time. I pay and grab my sandwich, giving him a quick thanks, before heading to one of the tables in the back. I sit down and take out my phone, trying to shake off the weird vibe. I keep telling myself I'm just overreacting, that maybe he's just socially awkward or something. It happens, right? So I'm sitting there, scrolling through my phone, taking a bite of my sandwich, trying to forget about the whole thing. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I see him. He's not behind the counter anymore. He's standing in the middle of the shop, just staring at me. Not moving, not saying anything, just staring. My heart starts pounding. I try to act like I haven't noticed, focusing on my phone, but my hands are starting to shake a little. I take another bite of my sandwich, chewing slowly, trying to think of what to do. Should I leave? Should I say something? What if he's just messing with me? I glance up again, and he's still there, but now he's got this creepy little smile on his face. It's not a friendly smile. It's more like he's amused, like he's enjoying my discomfort. I feel this wave of unease wash over me, and I decide it's time to go. I shove the rest of my sandwich back into the bag, grab my stuff, and start walking towards the door. As I pass him, he doesn't move, doesn't say anything, just keeps staring, that weird smile still on his face. I push open the door and practically sprint to my car, my heart racing. I get in, lock the doors, and just sit there for a second, trying to calm down. I glance back at the subway, and he's standing in the doorway, watching me. I don't think I've ever peeled out of a parking lot so fast in my life. I get home and try to shake it off. Maybe he was just being weird, trying to mess with me or something. I tell myself it's no big deal, just a creepy dude, and try to forget about it. But the image of him standing there, smiling at me, keeps popping into my head. A few days go by, and I'm starting to feel normal again, like maybe I was just overreacting. But then things start getting weird. One night, I'm sitting in my living room, watching TV, when I hear a noise outside. It's like a tapping sound, soft but insistent. I mute the TV and listen, but it stops. I tell myself it's probably just a branch or something, go back to my show. But then it happens again, this time louder. Tap, tap, tap. I get up and walk over to the window, peeking through the blinds, but I don't see anything. The street is quiet, no one around. I try to shake it off, but there's this gnawing feeling in my gut that something's not right. The next night, the same thing happens. This tapping sound, like someone's knocking on my window, but when I look, there's no one there. I start getting paranoid, checking the locks on all the doors and windows, making sure everything's secure. I try to tell myself it's nothing, maybe just the wind or an animal, but deep down, I know something's off. Then one night, I'm in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I hear it again. This time, it's not tapping. It's more like scratching, like someone's running their nails down the side of the house. I sit up, my heart pounding in my chest, listening. The sound moves, from one side of the house to the other, like someone's circling the place. I grab my phone and call the police, telling them someone's outside my house. They say they'll send someone over, but it'll be a few minutes. I'm sitting there, clutching my phone, listening to the scratching sound getting closer and closer until it's right outside my bedroom window. I get up, creeping over to the window, and peek through the blinds. At first I don't see anything, just darkness, but then I see it. A figure standing just beyond the edge of the window, in the shadows. It's him, the guy from Subway. He's just standing there, watching me, that same creepy smile on his face. I stumble back, dropping my phone, my heart racing. How did he find me? Why is he here? I feel this wave of panic wash over me, and I don't know what to do. I can hear the police sirens in the distance, getting closer, but they're not here yet. I stand there, frozen, not knowing what to do. I hear footsteps outside, moving around the side of the house. I grab the nearest thing I can find, a lamp, and hold it like a weapon, my hands shaking. The footsteps get closer, then stop. Silence. A few minutes later, the police arrive. I run to the door, let them in, and tell them what happened. They search the property, but they don't find anyone. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. It's like he was never there. They tell me to keep my doors and windows locked and call them if anything else happens. I'm left standing there, feeling this mix of fear and frustration. I know what I saw. I know he was there, watching me. But how did he find me? And why? The next few weeks are hell. I'm constantly on edge, jumping at every little noise, every creak in the house. I can't sleep, can't eat. I'm living in a state of constant fear, waiting for him to show up again. But he doesn't. The calls stop, the noises stop, and slowly, I start to feel like maybe it's over. Maybe he's gone, moved on to someone else. But I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment. It's been months now, and I still haven't been back to that subway. I can't even drive past it without feeling this wave of anxiety wash over me. I keep telling myself it's over, that he's gone, but there's this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that he's not done, that one day he'll show up again with that same creepy smile on his face. And every time I hear a noise outside, every time my phone rings, my heart skips a beat. I can't help but wonder if it's him, if he's come back to finish what he started. And that thought, more than anything, is what keeps me up at night. Alright, so there was this one time I decided to grab a quick bite at Subway. It was one of those days where you're just too tired to cook, you know? So I thought, why not? It was already getting dark, maybe around 8 p.m., and the place was almost empty. I remember thinking it was weird because that Subway is usually pretty busy. Anyway, I walked in, ordered my usual, a foot-long with everything on it, and found a seat in the far corner. As I was sitting there, just minding my own business, I noticed this guy sitting a few tables away. He was this middle-aged man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a dirty hoodie. His eyes were glued to me, not like a casual glance or anything. It was this intense stare, like he was trying to figure me out or something. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe he was just one of those people who don't realize they're staring. So, I'm sitting there, eating my sandwich, scrolling through my phone, trying to act like I didn't notice him. But every time I looked up, there he was, just staring. It started to freak me out a bit. I mean, who does that, right? It was like he was watching every bite I took. I even tried to give him a polite smile, thinking maybe he'd snap out of it, but no luck. He just kept staring. Now, the weird part is, I was the only one he was looking at. There were a couple of other people in the place, like a guy ordering at the counter and another girl sitting by the window, but this guy didn't seem to care about them at all. It was just me. It started to feel like I was the only person in the room with him. I thought about leaving, but then I figured I was just being paranoid. Maybe he was harmless, just a bit odd. So I kept eating, but faster this time, wanting to finish and get the hell out of there. That's when things got even weirder. The guy stood up and walked towards the counter, still looking at me. He didn't order anything. He just stood there, leaning on the counter, and continued to stare. The girl behind the counter noticed him and asked if he needed something. He didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on me. Then, finally, he turned to her and mumbled something I couldn't hear. The girl looked a bit uncomfortable and gave him this uneasy smile. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, this is getting really creepy. I decided to wrap up my sandwich and get out. As I was packing my stuff, I glanced up and saw him whisper something to the girl behind the counter again. This time, she looked directly at me with this strange expression, almost like she was scared or something. That's when the guy finally turned his gaze away from me and walked back to his table. He sat down but kept glancing at me from the corner of his eye. I got up and made my way to the door, trying to act as casual as possible. The second I was out of there, I felt a bit of relief, but it didn't last long. As I was walking to my car, I had this feeling that someone was following me. You know that sensation when you just know you're not alone? I turned around and there he was, standing just outside the subway, staring at me again. He didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I fumbled with my keys, trying to get into my car as fast as I could. My hands were shaking, and it felt like it took forever to unlock the door. When I finally got in and locked the doors, I looked back at the entrance of the subway. The guy was still there, but now he had this twisted smile on his face. It sent chills down my spine. I didn't waste any time. I started the car and drove off. As I was driving, I kept looking in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him following me, but there was no sign of him. I told myself I was probably just overreacting, that maybe he was just some weirdo who didn't know how to act in public, but the feeling of unease stayed with me the whole way home. When I got back to my apartment, I double-checked that I had locked all the doors and windows. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it was like that guy's eyes were still on me. It sounds crazy, but it felt like he was somehow still watching me, even though I knew he wasn't there. I decided to distract myself, turned on the TV, and tried to forget about the whole thing. A couple of hours later, I started to relax. I was beginning to think that maybe I had imagined the whole thing, or at least blown it out of proportion. I even laughed at myself for getting so freaked out over a creepy dude at Subway. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message said, "Nice sandwich choice." My heart dropped. There was no way it could be him, right? I didn't even know how he could have gotten my number. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. How the hell did he know what I ordered? And how did he get my number? I decided to ignore the text, thinking it might be some prank or spam. But then another message came through. This time it was a picture of me sitting in the subway, eating my sandwich. It was taken from a weird angle, almost like it was from the perspective of a security camera or something. But the scariest part was that in the background, I could see the guy sitting at his table, staring right at the camera. Panic set in. I had no idea what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I tell them? That some guy at Subway was creeping me out and somehow managed to send me a picture of myself? It sounded insane. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how this guy could have taken the picture and sent it to me. Was he some kind of hacker? Or maybe he worked at Subway and had access to the security cameras. But even then, how did he get my number? Another text came through. This time it was just one word: soon. I felt sick to my stomach. I looked around my apartment, feeling paranoid. Was he outside? Was he watching me right now? I couldn't see anything through the windows, but that didn't make me feel any better. I decided to call the police. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I needed help. I called 911 and explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady. The dispatcher told me to stay inside and that they would send someone over to check things out. While I waited, I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message to come through, but there was nothing. It felt like an eternity before the police arrived. When they did, they took a look around the area and checked the apartment building, but they didn't find anything suspicious. They asked if I wanted to file a report, but I had no real evidence besides the text and the photo. They told me to call them if anything else happened and left. I felt a little better knowing that they had checked the place, but I was still on edge. I double-checked all the locks again and even blocked the door with a chair, just in case. I stayed up all night, too scared to go to sleep. I kept expecting to hear a knock on the door or see his face at the window. The next day, I went to the Subway to see if they had cameras and maybe get some answers. I talked to the manager and asked if they had footage from the previous night. The manager seemed confused and said they didn't have any security cameras in the dining area, just one in the back for the storage room. That's when it hit me. The angle of the photo, it wasn't from a security camera, it was from his phone. He had somehow managed to take that picture himself without me noticing. I felt sick all over again. I asked the manager if they had seen the guy before, but they said they didn't recognize the description. I left the Subway feeling even more freaked out. I tried to go about my day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. For weeks after that, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I never went back to that Subway, and I changed my phone number just to be safe. I never got any more texts or saw that guy again, but the whole experience left me paranoid. Even now, when I go to places like that, I can't help but feel like someone's watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. It's something that sticks with you, you know? That feeling of being hunted, even if it's just in your head.